And from that orange or orange juice, we don't want any of that sugar just sitting passively in our intestines, just sitting there. That's when you're going to get that big gut ache. If you do feel as if that you're going to throw up and regurgitate before competition, then your body is trying to regurgitate that food so that way the blood can leave the stomach area and get out to the extremities. What is going on, everybody? Hey, it's Opera. We have another video coming back at you, and you already see the topic right here. We'll get started. This is pre-competition game plan, and this topic will cover mostly the nutrition, and because it needs to be discussed. And I say that because over the last several years, some of the wrestling and jiu-jitsu tournaments that I've been involved in, this topic can be quite useful. And with respect to nutrition and when to eat and the game plan for that, that can be a very big positive notion, and it can also be a deterrent. And I say that because as an uncomfortable conversation as this could be, there has been numerous times over the years where I've been into certain places at competitions, mainly the bathrooms, and it sounds like people are fighting for their lives while they're trying to go to the bathroom.
Now, your mama told me what happened to you yesterday. How the hell you gonna get fired on your day off?
I don't know.
And this can be avoided, and we don't need to be struggling on the porcelain god, if you will, before competition. There's plenty of different things that we can do to address this issue, from certain supplements that we can take, as well as to certain foods that we can eat, as well as to the timing of those foods. So of course, when we approach a certain competition time, the best protocol is to ensure that we do not have any food in our stomach. And I have done a video on regurgitation. I will put a little card for that right here. And go watch that video, as it will explain what actually happens when we regurgitate. And regurgitation that is correlated to exercise is actually not a sign of a lack of physical fitness, although it has a tendency to be portrayed as that. So moving forward with this topic, again, the objective is to ensure that when we compete, we need the optimum level of fuel sources in our body without any actual food that's in our stomach. And so that's going to take a fair amount of time for certain foods to digest. And so the first thing that we need to cover is the bathroom visits that need to occur. And again, because as I mentioned, it sounds like there are numerous people in the locker rooms and in the bathrooms that are fighting for their lives, and that actually shouldn't happen whatsoever. I would argue that that's a significant sign of a lack of insoluble fiber, and the American diet is already low in insoluble fibers, and insoluble fiber means that it's just basically a pipe cleaner, and it's fiber that cannot be absorbed into the bloodstream via the small intestine. And that's why the whole entire joke of corn comes in, corn comes out, because we can't really absorb it, and so it's just going to be a basic kind of pipe cleaner and kind of clean everything out.
Well, looky here. Corn off the cob. Let's get you get his money back.
And if someone is visiting the porcelain god, if you will, there should never be a fight or a struggle, because it should be kind of free-flowing. And think of an excellent way to get a visual without it being disgusting would be if you were out raking leaves and you put those leaves in a large trash bag, and then if something were to happen to that trash bag, let's say the trash bag gets cut or you turn the trash bag upside down, the leaves just fall out gracefully. And that's how a bathroom visit should actually go. And again, this idea of fighting and pushing, and that's arguably a sign of extremely low insoluble fiber in your diet. So that's the very first thing to help prepare for our pre-competition game plan, is to ensure that we have a fair amount of insoluble fibers in our diet. An excellent source to supplement that would be psyllium husk. And psyllium husk is kind of like a sand, kind of grainy material that you just drink. And you can just put a tablespoon of that into your mouth, follow it by some water, and that's going to help with the bathroom visits the next day. Again, because the last thing that you want is to have to go out to a competition, whether it's track and field, swimming, boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, MMA, and you feel the need to go number 2. And another excellent source of the insoluble fibers will also be the spinach, the kales. anything that would be considered the kind of the slang term of roughage. And again, it's going to be the insoluble fibers that go through our intestines that help clean everything out. I'll say it again, the pushing and going crazy in the morning, if it's pellets that are coming out, that's another sign of constipation, that we do not have the insoluble fiber in our diets that we need. Oatmeals are good sources of insoluble fiber as well. And then the next thing is we need to take into consideration the glycemic index. So it's been said that you're going to want to eat fairly robust foods 3 to 4 hours before a competition, 3.5 hours. And if we can somehow take the foods that we need or want to eat prior to that and already break it down, as an example, using a blender, that is an excellent way to kind of skip the mechanical digestion processes that we utilize, such as the chewing and using the saliva. And just get that down into our body and already into the stomach where that digestion will start to occur. So the idea of the glycemic index, then we can kind of time our food as well. If we have foods such as oatmeals or toast or a bagel that's a little bit lower on the glycemic index, that will actually take a longer time to digest. And by digest, I mean that the eventual coin, what we really want is the amount of glucose that's in our bloodstream. And the glucose is the smallest denominator, and that's the final fuel source that we need to create exponential amounts of adenosine triphosphate, because that right there is going to be the end goal. If our body is extremely low on glucose and glycogen and we try to perform at high intensities, it's not going to allow it to happen, because the glucose and the glycogen is an extremely small bond. A carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen is 6, 12, and 6. I have another video about carbohydrates and why we need to eat them. I'll put a card for that right there. I strongly suggest that you go watch that video, like that video as well too. And please subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel, and if I can trouble you to like all the videos, that would help me out greatly. So the notion of glucose in our bloodstream, that is the end result. This bond is so easy to break, and ultimately that's going to help us regenerate that ATP so we can have those muscular contractions. Utilizing the glycemic index, the lower the score of the glycemic index, the longer it's going to take a certain food to break down all the way and fully digest and absorb into that small intestine. So if we have oatmeals, bagels, those sorts of items, we want to consume those items about 3.5 to maybe 4 hours away from when we compete. As we get closer and closer to the competition, if your competition is here, and if we compete at 12 p.m., then at about 10 a.m. is when we can utilize bananas. That's a great fuel source, or maybe even a very light yogurt with no fat in it. We don't want any of those larger triglyceride chains or anything like that. We don't want to focus on trying to digest and absorb those into our body. We need the light yogurts, the bananas, the very light bananas. As you get closer and closer towards your competition time, if we're only about 1 hour out, then I would strongly suggest some sort of electrolyte drink like a Gatorade.
Really?
Something with the easy sugars in it to process. I've had the conversation about certain fruits such as strawberries, oranges, and bananas. The orange and the banana, those are two great items that we can eat prior to a workout, but I would highly favor the banana over the orange. The banana has a much higher glycemic index and can break down so much faster rather than the orange. I believe the banana is at a 50 or 51 and the orange is somewhere around a 40. And from that orange or orange juice, we don't want any of that sugar just sitting passively in our intestines, just sitting there. That's when you're going to get that big gut ache. If you do feel as if that you're going to throw up and regurgitate before competition, then your body is trying to regurgitate that food so that way the blood can leave the stomach area and get out to the extremities to help send all that oxygen to those respiring tissues. The night before is when you're going to want to take that psyllium husk so we don't have to have such a struggling time in the bathroom that morning of. And in general, the overall levels of insoluble fiber in the American diet, it needs to increase. Colon cancer is definitely a big thing. And I'm going to say it again, you don't want to be fighting and struggling on the toilet. We need to have the bathroom visits be actually fairly brief and easy. And another alternative to the psyllium husk is to take a laxative.
1/2 teaspoon.
for fast, effective relief.
That's another great alternative that we can utilize. Do not experiment with a laxative the night before a tournament. You'll certainly want to experiment that on a night before that we don't have to compete the next day. So laxatives, psyllium husk, oatmeals, much more spinach and kale. Increase the insoluble fiber in our diets. That will help out tremendously with our pre-competition game plan, and so that way we don't have to spend, several minutes, half hour, whatever it is, in the bathroom fighting for our lives. Because I think that's a big deterrent to have to manage and mitigate before we compete. And then with respect to the hydration levels before a competition, just understand that your body will want to urinate much, much more before competition because that's part of the pre-competitive anxiety. And getting rid of the urine, getting rid of that nonsense in your body so that way you don't have to carry that around while we compete, that's just part of it. So that desire to urinate, I actually have another video about that right here. I'll put a card for that as well. So this pre-competition game plan, to summarize, we need to have significant levels of insoluble fibers in our diet. We need to utilize the glycemic index to a fair degree to gauge the foods that we need to eat and want to eat before that competition. And I would suggest to make it the same thing every time. If you compete at 10 a.m., make sure you eat around 6:45. As you get closer, then the foods get lighter and the glycemic index gets higher of those foods, such as a banana versus an orange. If you feel as if you have to throw up right before that competition, that's certainly not a bad sign. That's just your body saying, hey, get this food out of the stomach so that we can get the blood back to the extremities and we can use that blood to deliver the oxygen rather than to digest that food. So adequate amounts of hydration and water, insoluble fibers, increase that throughout the diets. There will be some trial and error with that if you're new to competing on a regular basis, but a fair amount of practice and you will start to get the rhythm down of what you need to eat, how much insoluble fiber you should be taking, and then utilizing that glycemic index. So that is it for this video. Please feel free to email me with any sorts of questions, comments, and or complaints. I would also suggest to put the questions in the comments below. Please do like this video and subscribe for more content, and we will see you all next time. Knuckles. Nope. Man, every time.